Okay, welcome back to SHREWSWORTHY, everybody. My name's Ben. You already knew that. It's literally in the show title. I really need to just stop saying that. And here with me today, the funniest comedian that I've talked to this week, at minimum, Matthew Blevins. Matthew, how you
Hey,
doing, buddy?
folks. Oh, not too bad. But now that you've described me as the funniest comedian you've spoken to this week, I feel an enormous amount of pressure to deliver somehow, and I'm not. There's no way that's going to happen. I'm sorry, we're both screwed. This podcast episode is ruined.
Uh, I've had plenty of those. Don't worry. Um, I've very much had my Joaquin Phoenix on Letterman moment a couple of times. Uh, don't worry, it can't. It can only get better. Uh, so if you don't already know, Matthew does have a comedy special here on Loch 22 that went up about this time last
Yeah,
year.
April. It was actually April Fool's Day last year. Yeah, yeah. So
I seem to remember it being warmer when that came out, but it came out on April 1st, so I know it was colder than hell. But
yeah, you're up in Fargo. I'm down here in down by Nashville, and so it was probably 132 degrees when it came out here. But uh, out, and if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it because we need the views. It's gotten literally dozens of views. So
it's over 400 now. It's doing
oh, it's over 400. All right, hell yeah, man,
it
we're
was at
getting
like
there.
430, 420 something.
I'm not going to pretend like I don't know the exact number every single day. It's 436 or
Well, I went to rewatch it, and I think it would have been really funny if it was on like 420 exactly. I would have had to contemplate, like, do I want to rewatch this or do I just want to leave this alone? Because that's like too perfect.
just yeah,
That's too perfect. It's
it's too
just
perfect.
it's art in a view count.
Absolutely.
Let's talk
That
about
was
your.
a
Go ahead.
I was going to say that was a really fun shoot, and Brad Stewart was the host of that particular special at the Zoolarious show at the Zoo Bar in Lincoln, Nebraska. Is a historic venue, and it was a historic show. And Brad has since passed away, so it's really cool to me that it got to be captured in that venue with Brad kind of introducing the show. He just passed this past year, I believe. So
It's so funny to me because the way you guys shot that comedy special for the venue you were in was perfect.
yeah,
And
yeah, very cool, very punk rock, I think.
and a lot of comedy specials do, and me and you talked about this before the show. They mute the crowd, and it's like you said, you're losing the magic trick.
Yeah.
But it felt like you guys actually mic'd the crowd up good enough to be able to hear everything, or you just positioned the cameras so perfectly.
Oh, Damon Marvin, he put a lot of work into editing that together, and I think we had like a shotgun mic pointed toward the crowd for that, and the sound guy at the zoo bar was very gracious, and he was able to get us all of the tracks and everything. So it was kind of nice to be able to, for my first kind of project, have a lot of great, wonderful, talented people like willing to put in work to make something that I did like come to fruition. So, I'm forever grateful for that.
So we know you got the comedy special here on Loch 22. Let's go back before that. When did you get started in comedy?
It would have been May of 2016. Yeah, and yeah, it was a bit of a long path to get there. I was 35 years old at that time, and a lot of my friends were like, "You're not funny. Why are you pursuing comedy?" But I had spent all of the year 2014. I had to go to the hospital twice a day to get injections for this health issue that I was having. And, I was very depressed. It was a very long year and a very trying situation, especially when I was trying to raise kids. And um, by the time that year was over, I realized that, I'd always wanted to do comedy, but I was just too afraid to do it. And by that whole life experience and going through hell and coming back from it, I'm like, well, yeah, I have nothing left to be afraid of. So kind of hit the first open mic I could find, which was the Barley Street Tavern in Omaha, Nebraska. Rest in peace. And I haven't stopped since.
So you start at this open mic at what sounds like and correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is how I interpret most things in Omaha, a bar that is very much so nooked into an alley. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, the Barley Street Tavern was definitely in an alley. Spent many a night in that on that alley with a bunch of derelicts and other stand-up comics. But yeah,
Derelicts, stand-up comics. Sometimes you can't tell the difference. Sometimes they're
right. No,
both.
it's something. Yeah, they're both. Most of the time, they're both.
Most of the time, the person you thought was the funniest is often also the most fucked up. Uh,
Yeah, that's that's usually the case. Yes, and if we can get out of our way long enough to forge a comedy career, some of us actually make it. But most of us just become like these weird oddball characters that you hear about in stories. So I'm trying to avoid that part of it.
I mean, there would be some advantage to that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if you could make royalties on that. Man, that'd be a career all to its own. Uh, so obviously you go through this awful health thing that kind of causes you to say, and I'm sure this is probably literally what you said, fuck it.
hmm Yep.
When did you make that transition from open mics to actual bookings, or was that kind of just a natural thing that happened over time?
It's a long, slow process for comics. And this was the case in 2016, where the open mic scene in Omaha and Lincoln were both thriving, and so there were always plenty of stage opportunities, and you could get up. Um, Usually, I got up at about 5 times a week on these open mic stages, and you get noticed, and so you kind of get asked to be on these shows and you string enough of those shows together, and then eventually you find yourself in the middle of a comedy career. But you never really feel like you're on stable ground. You're always clinging to the next thing that you got ahead of you. But yeah, it was. And speaking of Brad Stewart, he saw me perform at an open mic at Duffy's back in 2016, and I had just watched Brad open for Mark Maron 2 months before I started comedy at the Rococo Theater in Lincoln. And so just to see that guy was at this same open mic, it kind of brought a validity to what I was doing. And he actually stayed to watch me perform, and then he booked me on a Zoolarius because of that. So uh, yeah, if you're thinking about trying stand-up comedy, go find an open mic and then just slog it out, and you'll get booked on a show or two. But keep low expectations, because like forging your own comedy voice and getting a career in it takes years, decades. I'm in it 7 years now, and I'm now to the point to where I can hop on enough shows in the South here. I can, drive 20 minutes to in just about any direction, and there's a show that I can get a guest spot on, and not have to sit through an open mic with 30 other comedians. Get some substance in my work, and then between the road gigs that I get booked on, that kind of keeps me sharp and keeps my material up to date and all that good stuff.
It was so funny. I had Doc Peterson on last week, and he was talking a lot about what you just did with the open mics. And I'm sure a lot of these open mics, because he made the joke, he was like, and half the time I would only laugh at like one or two of the people going before me.
Sure.
Because some of these guys are just either A, so green that they don't know their ass from their elbow up there,
Yeah. Yeah.
or B, they're just open mic comedians and that's all they're ever going to be because that's all they want to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Some people that's good enough for them. And, and don't get me wrong, open mics are an essential part of the process.
You
You
can't
can't just, you can't jump onto a show. You have to prove yourself, and you have to prove yourself for a long, long time. Like, I Duffy's used to be so demoralizing some weeks, because you'd get like 6 college kids in there that hated that there were comedians trying to perform on stage. That I used to park in a parking garage across the street, and I would keep the receipts every time I had a good set at Duffy's, just to remind myself that sometimes it can be okay. But yeah, you have to go through those years. But then when you get far enough along in your comedy trajectory, and you've proven yourself, and you have enough contacts, and you know you can be an asset to a show, then you should probably spend more of your time cultivating those relationships and pursuing better stage time. Otherwise, you can get lost in those open mics for 15 years and never find your way out.
Well, it's like I say with podcasting, you're going to be grinding it for ever before you do anything. I mean, like for example, I have been doing this for 4 years, 3 years. I don't even know anymore. An insane amount of time with an insane amount of sleep lost. At any rate, uh, but like I've never made a dime doing this, and I probably at some point will admit to myself that I never will. I mean, I'm only 24, so I guess there's time. But like to give you an idea of how much I've been working my ass off at this and just getting flowing in different directions, I'm hosting a wedding next week, which is just this weird experience. And like they're my friend, but the reason they decided to have me MC their wedding was because they listened to one of my shows. And I'm like, what?
Sure.
That is the weirdest correlation you could make, but I'm gonna go with it because the money's nice.
Yeah, you could like go from podcast host to wedding MC. I MC'd a wedding Noppet 3 weeks ago. You never know.
I
You never know.
My only fear with it is the crowd is just gonna be dead and they're gonna be like throwing tomatoes at my head. But if that happens, it will be a good Twitter clip.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, when audiences don't act the way that you want them to, just call them assholes. That's usually what I do.
Just hey, when the audience doesn't work, you guys are assholes.
Yeah, it's their fault. It's never your fault. Like, even if it's your fault, don't own that shit. Like,
Not publicly.
no.
When you get off stage, you can be like, "Ah, oh, that fucking sucked." But
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Doc Peterson, he gave me a lot of awesome opportunities over the years too. He and I shared some of his first stages there at Rumology some years ago, and then he was able to leverage those contacts, and eventually he got shows at the Bourbon Theater, and now he's doing some arena show. Like he's taken that path. I wish I would have taken the money path sometimes, but I don't know. I'll just grind out here in the trenches and obscurity until someone finds me.
I mean, you're more likely to get found by somebody in Nashville than Omaha. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna be real with you. Just because Nashville is this entertainment hub of like music and a little bit of film, but also comedians come out of there all the time. So you got this entertainment hub in Nashville, especially downtown Nashville, where it's just everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I always kind of, it was interesting going from Omaha, where I was kind of a known amongst the comedy community, and now I'm in a new city where I'm not anybody, and it's kind of nice to start from the bottom rung again and then find your way back up. See if you can do that in Nashville, and then I think after the kids are graduated from high school, I'd like to do some time in New York City and, hit those circuits and be a nobody again there. So I think that's essential to my process is I need to be held accountable for what I'm doing on stage, and I need to be humbled.
Have you, and I like to ask this of any live performer, whether it's musician, comedian, any live performer you can think of, has there ever been a moment where you've been standing up there like thinking, oh my God, I have completely lost this crowd and they do not want anything to do with me?
Yeah, a couple times last night. So, it happens all the time.
Where you're just like, I lost them. It's
Yep.
it. They're gone. They
Well,
are
okay.
gone.
It's how you handle that that determines whether or not you stay at open mics or you get to start doing shows, because that's not an optional part of the process. That will happen to you as a comedian. If you're on enough stages, you're going to get that response. What I used to do is I would like immediately shrink into myself because I'm like, oh shit, they finally figured me out. Everything I've been doing for the past 7 years was a lie because this audience isn't laughing right now. So I just don't let myself go there anymore. Like, oh, I lost them. Let's see. let's dig something out, or I'll call them an asshole. Like that's always the option too.
I mean, I feel like, and this is a very much a inside joke, and if you don't get it, go watch the Loch 22 special. I feel like pulling out the Toyota Super Bit is a really good way to pull everybody back.
That's right. You've always got those that you can like pull out of your back pocket. If you put enough years into comedy, you're gonna have some magic tricks up your sleeve to help you in those situations.
I mean, I if I was in a crowd and I was part of the dead group and you pulled the COVID card out and were like, and on the back is my set for tonight. What's this about spitting in assholes? Oh god, that popped me. I rewatched that again not that long ago, so I just got it all on the top because after you watch a comedy special, you get the jokes like stuck in your head for a day or two.
Sure.
If it's actually funny.
Yeah, yeah.
The worst thing ever is if you've ever seen a bad comedy special, and I'm sure you've seen a
Oh
few,
yeah.
and then you get like a joke that wasn't even particularly funny stuck in your head, and you're like, why do I even care?
You know, I think people have forged entire careers off of that,
What?
but yeah, that having the jokes that stick in people's craw not for the right reason.
I feel like that is a horrible way to make a career,
Hmm.
but because I don't feel like you're being genuine at that point if you're just intentionally writing some of the worst shit you've ever heard.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of social media that thrives off of that entire philosophy right there. It's just all expendable garbage. But
But I don't get this TikTok generation any more than you probably do. I'm
no,
younger I'm younger than you and I don't get it.
yeah,
And that should tell you something. Like I'm not that much younger than you. I'm not like 20 years younger than you, but
you're close. You're close. I'm
what
40. I'm going to be 43.
but like we're roughly 16, 17, 18 years apart, somewhere in there.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
And neither one of us get it.
No.
And everybody's like, oh, people in their 20s, they all understand TikTok. And I'm sitting over here like, no, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've thought I've been doing myself a disservice by not leaning into some of that stuff. And I've had like ideas and different projects that, but if you want to do a project well, even if it's a silly 3-second TikTok bit, I would want to make sure that I edit it properly. I want it to be good looking content. I want it to represent me well. And I just don't want to get great at that. That's not what I'm trying to get good at. I'm trying to get good on stage, and things are gonna flourish where you put your attention. And if I'm putting my attention into making great TikTok content, then I'm not putting attention into becoming great on stage.
Also, I feel like very much so it's a matter of understanding whatever platform you're using, whether that's a stage, YouTube, whatever. There are so many people on the platform that we're on right now, which is youtube.com/Loch22 Productions. There are so many people on YouTube that I feel like don't understand the platform they're on.
Hmm.
Like they just don't get it for whatever reason. They know what they're doing, but they don't understand what it is they're on. Because I've noticed lately, specifically with YouTube, and you've probably noticed certain things like this in comedy. I've noticed certain topics on YouTube work a whole hell of a lot better than others.
Yeah,
Like these interviews generally work pretty well when it's like a comedian or a musician. But if I interviewed like another YouTuber, that would not go over well.
sure.
And I just know that. And I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just trying to trick the algorithm into working for you, I guess. And I've never been I've never been great about that. Um,
It's not even about
and
tricking the algorithm. It's about watching it and being like, okay, what gap can I hit here? It's like a football team. You're trying to figure out which gap you got to hit the quarterback. It's
yeah,
like, okay, I got the A gap, I got the C gap, and we got the G gap all the way down there that may work, but we're not going to try it unless we absolutely have to.
yeah. And so if you're concentrating on that element of it, then it makes it harder to be authentic, and it makes it hard to. And I think that's a lot of what people are forgetting. What drove them to podcasts in the first place was that it was the authenticity that you weren't getting on other major platforms that wasn't available anywhere else. So
Well,
once you,
podcasting started because radio shows got garbage. That's how this happened. I mean, do I
no,
think podcasts would have happened even if radio shows had the same freedom that I do? Yeah, probably. But radio shows will never have the freedom that we do. That is one of the things that I learned quickly. I was trying to break into the radio business for about a year. Even recently, up until earlier this year, I was really kind of trying to break into the radio business. And I learned something in trying to break into the radio business. It sucks.
hmm
Okay. You have no freedom. You are entirely scripted, and not like the kind of scripted where you write your own shit. Like somebody writes this shit for you without meeting you, and they will shove lines down your throat. And it is just like, I don't want to do that.
yeah, it's kind of a sad life too, and it doesn't pay well. And you're sitting in a closet reading copy. It's if I'm gonna sit in a closet and read copy, I'm just gonna do it on my own terms.
Right. If I wanted to sit in the closet reading copy, I would start writing a book or something and then go sit in my closet and review what I wrote. Like,
Mhm.
or you, if you wanted to sit in your closet and read copy, you'd probably write a comedy sketch for
Yeah,
one of your specials, and then you'd crawl in your closet and you'd read it.
yeah, yeah. That's kind of my process. I actually am in a closet right now.
I mean, it didn't look like a closet if that makes you feel any better.
No, it's a large closet, but it's still a closet. This is my office. This is where the magic happens, I guess.
So, what generally inspires you to write a comedy bit? I know it's different for everybody. Some people it's an event, some people it's, oh, that was funny, I'm going to write that down and put it in something later. Some people blend certain events that happen in their life and kind of make it into one condensed bit.
Yeah, all of my stuff is going to come from my life in some capacity. It's like, why am I up there if I'm not revealing some sort of truth about who I am or what my family is, or and shoot, my with my family and my background and everything, sometimes all I have to do is go up there and just explain the truth in the order that they happened, and then maybe insert a punchline or two in there. But that's the best stuff I feel is you can have an entire parade of like, I don't know, sad white dudes doing stand-up comedy, and some of them you might even remember some of the stuff that they said, but it's the ones who told you who they were in some way, that's the one that's going to stick with you. And even when I'm talking about spitting in buttholes, I'm revealing something about my inner truth.
Or or I don't I don't remember the exact context. Forgive me, it has been a couple of days and this is fairly early on in the special. The cousin fucking punchline just
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I just I I had to pause it. I was laughing.
And what's weird about that one is like you do that around Nebraska City and you have five other people in the audience that know exactly what you're talking about. It's like there's a true element to being, and I don't know if it's necessarily the region, but it's definitely a class issue. I think a lot of, I don't know. I think everybody that grew up poor for whatever reason is somewhat attracted to their cousins, and there's nothing I can do about that. That's just,
I I genuinely, there was a couple of times because I watched this when it first came out, but I had forgotten that there's like two or three moments where if I don't pause this, I'm gonna miss something because that's how hard I'm laughing with your comedy special.
oh, thank
And I'm sure we've all seen comedy specials like that where you're watching it and they say something and it gets you to the point where you're like, okay, yep, stop.
you know that's the thing, that's the objective when I'm in an audience, or like if I'm in front of an audience, I don't want to give them a moment to think about it. I want to keep them kind of trapped in that rhythm, and so you hit them with punchline after punchline after punchline, and yeah, and then you close strong in the end.
So when you filmed this comedy special, and I'm just curious, it did you know how long you were going to be able to be up there beforehand, or was this one of those go up there, kill him, champ, and we'll see you when you get back?
So this was specifically this was going to be my half hour at the time. And so I had been practicing my half hour all over the city. And um, I think that by the time I had been up on that stage, I had already been up 10 times that week, including at the Bourbon Theater in front of 400 people the very night before. And so by the time I was at the zoo bar, I was very confident in my material and I could just kind of let it flow and be loose. And it fell in right at about a half an hour. I think it was like a minute over a half an hour by the time it was done.
Explain for an idiot like me, where is the zoo bar in the Nebraska comedy hierarchy? I know Damon said it was pretty up there, but
Yeah.
I didn't catch all of it.
Yeah. So the zoo bar it's historically it's a blues bar. It still is a blues bar. And it's just one of those venues that has character just baked into the wall. I mean, Nirvana played there. So like it's always been this really cool spot. And then Brad Stewart, he had spent some time out in LA and, he opened for Joan Rivers and had himself a comedy career going. And he moved back to help out his parents. And he started like the comedy show at the Zoo Bar. And it was one of Nebraska's institutions. There's some new folks now. James Lindsay, Mallory Wallace, and Jake Gardner are kind of carrying the torch for Brad now, and they've got Zoot Nanny. It's not every week like the Zoolarious show used to be, but the Zoo Bar, you could see some of the best comedians working. Brad would have like Eddie Pepitone. Kyle Kinane literally came and did a Zoo Bar show 2 days before I recorded my special at that same venue. Sam Talent, he recorded part of his special there as well. You can catch that on Amazon Prime. And yeah, it's just one of those places, man. It's got a lot of character. It's undeniably cool, and it's really cool to be a part of that history, I guess.
See, what's weird about Midwest comedy, and me and Doc talked about this last week, and I want your opinion on it, is I feel
Mhm.
like 15 years ago, it was over for the Midwest in terms of comedy. Like it was done. Like you couldn't find a comedy scene in the Midwest to save your life. I feel
Yeah.
like that. I feel like this very much flipped now, and I don't even know what caused it. Maybe it's some of these comedians that were originally from the Midwest moving back. Maybe it's
I think podcasting had a large part to do with that, and I think you started to get these comedy scenes emerging all over the country, for better or worse. Sometimes it seems like there's too much of it out there, but yeah, in 2016 it was thriving, and it's still really thriving. Omaha and Lincoln have got great comedy scenes, and they're great producers doing all sorts of awesome stuff. And the Zoo Bar, they're still doing their thing, and then you got Doc producing his stuff, and then the Storm Cellar in Lincoln, a really cool venue. They've got awesome shows happening there where there's 80, 90 people showing up in the audience for these things. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of one of those cultural lightning in a bottle situations where I think the political climate at the time got everybody wanting to get out of the house or something, and then all these comedy scenes popped up because everybody wanted to figure out why these people were so successful on these podcasting platforms. And yeah, and now we've got comedy scenes everywhere, which
like, for example, when I still lived in Fargo, I felt like there was comedy shows popping up all over the place, and I was like, I lived there for 2 years, and that started happening in 2022. But it's Fargo, so expect everything to be at least 6 years behind.
yeah, well, post pandemic also helped with that. So when once everything kind of got back into full swing, I think a lot of people were cooped up, and it's like, let's produce a comedy show.
Like comedy shows started coming into Fargo, and I was just like, this is a college town. Good luck, guys.
Yeah,
Good luck, champs. I
yeah.
hope I hope you don't bury yourself because Fargo
Well,
is not the most fun place to be for a comedian.
I can't imagine. And I think that one of the setbacks with this new resurgence in comedy popularity is that we're ruining bars for everyone else. So I'm sorry for that.
I mean, I was I don't know that you're ruining bars, but I think certain bad comedians are ruining bars. But
Yeah.
um, it was funny because Bert Kreischer of all stinking people tried to run Fargo, and he didn't just try to run Fargo for one night. He tried to he sold out the first night and then booked another night in the same building. In Fargo, that just does not work. Somebody should have told him, dude, that doesn't work in Fargo. You're gonna drown. Like you're done. So they put the second night on sale. They ended up canceling the second show because it did not sell.
Yeah.
Because it's Fargo, which again, why nobody told this guy, dude, it's Fargo. You're lucky you sold out one. You're not going to do a second one. It's not going to happen. And he's like, no,
I
it'll
think he
be fine.
got, did he get stuck there?
Yes. And
I
then he
thought
got stuck. And he's like, what am I going to do?
well, more power to him for trying, I guess. He's kind of one of those he's one of those guys who's, because he's a dad, and I think because he has a lot of the ADHD traits that I identify with, he's kind of my spirit guide or some sort of thing, to where it's like, okay, I can forge ahead and find my own path and be okay with that.
I mean, the main reason I really like him and I respect him for this is he's kind of just willing to try shit.
Yeah.
He doesn't really care. Like people have asked him, what would you do if you lost your fame and popularity tomorrow? He's like, I don't know. I'd I'd get it all back again. I'd work for 10 years and get it all back again. If that's the worst thing that can happen to me, shit.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not even, he said, he makes the joke like, yes, I'm terrified of it, but in the end, I'm not really that worried about it.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if you became a stand-up comedian at his level, that means that you spent at least a decade in the trenches, just, you know, in obscurity. No one knows who you are. No one's coming to your stuff. You're just trying to figure it out. So he knows what that's like. He's been there before.
I mean, unless you're Rogan, because he had this weird career where he went from kind of trying stand-up comedy and then he did the Fear Factor thing and the UFC thing and then he went back to stand-up after he already made a name for himself everywhere else,
Sure.
which is like, okay, yes, you grinded for this, but I have to wonder, like, obviously other comedians respect Joe, obviously, because if they didn't, they wouldn't all go on his podcast, whether I like him or not.
Yeah,
And everybody's got their own opinion on Rogan. It doesn't really matter.
sure.
But, obviously other comedians respect him. So, the story I heard is he only did comedy for 5 years before he blew up like a son of a bitch. But I don't even know if that's true.
That, I think that timeline sounds about right. But then I think he suddenly realized while he's on the set of this TV show at the time, that, because this was like the sitcom days. I can't even remember what the sitcom he was on was
Might
called,
have been,
News
no,
Radio.
I was going to say might have been Fear Factor, but that was not a sitcom.
No, he was on a sitcom with like Phil Hartman, and I think Dave Foley was a part of this project. And I sound like such an old man, but I can't remember what the name of it was. It might have been News Radio. And I think he realized that he wasn't able to put in the stage time. And so I think part of him missed a lot of that. And I totally understand that. If I get away from the stage for too long, I just start chomping at the bit. And I think that's what differentiates people who are comics versus people who are doing stand-up comedy, I guess. It's like you have to do it.
Is there an adrenaline factor with the crowd when it's going?
Yeah, for sure. And you have to learn how to hang your hat on something else, because if you keep pursuing that feeling, if you keep pursuing that, I don't know, that dopamine hit that you get from killing in front of a bunch of people, that's a dead end street. You gotta you got to want to do it for like, I want my bits to translate really well. I want to master this particular bit. I want to talk about this particular topic. You've got to find other things that drive you, because that, yeah, that addiction to that crowd reaction, that's a dead end street. And if you do comedy long enough, you'll have that kind of just beaten out of you anyway, because you have to do poorly for a long time before you learn how to like do well. And then people who only put themselves in situations where they can succeed, they never really figure out how to make it work anywhere and everywhere. So I don't know. It's just, it's part of, I think it's part of the evolution of a comedian is you have to lose your love for that feeling.
I always think that's so interesting with live performances in general, whether it's music. I do another show on this channel, Two Marks and a Spark. We talk about pro wrestling, and even wrestlers say, yeah, dude, you got to lose that dopamine hit that you get from going out there, because keep in mind, these wrestlers go out there in certain cases in front of 100,000 people. You know,
Yeah.
you're not going to replicate 100,000 people at AT&T Stadium in Biloxi, Mississippi on a Tuesday night. Those
Yeah.
probably aren't comparable.
No, they're not. And you need to figure out how to love that Biloxi Tuesday night as much as you love that 100,000 people event. You have to.
I think that's for any live performer, though, no matter if it's comedy or whatever, because if you don't like running Mississauga, then you're not going to have fun. Then it's going to be harder to have fun when you run, if you are ever able to run, you know, New York, the Garden, whatever. Because if you just stay hooked on that dopamine hit, like you said, I feel like you're going to be chasing the ghost for ever, and you're just
Yeah.
going to burn out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen it happen. There are enough cautionary tales that you meet along your path in performance to where it's like, oh, I know what happened to that guy, and you have to figure out another way to make it work.
Do you think, in comedy specifically, because it's no secret comedy's a bit of a dirty business at times, do you think there are certain people in the comedy business intentionally feeding newer comedians bad advice to try to get them to burn out?
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it. I don't ever see it from successful comedians. Is I what I've found is that like the most successful comedians are some of the most gracious and wonderful people who are just full of like they'll give you good advice and they'll throw you a gig or that sort of thing. It's the old bitter dudes who never quite made it, and it's not. I mean, it's not on accident that they didn't make it. It's that attitude that, defines whether or not you're going to make it.
How much of the old bitter dude thing is still floating around the comedy scene now? Because I feel like I've heard that they're doing a lot to try to kick it out, but you can only
Oh,
do so much.
it's still thriving out there. That's the thing is that these younger folks that put on diverse and inclusive shows, that's going to draw one particular type of audience, an audience that I myself would probably more resonate with. But then you've got these people that are appealing to the mass middle, and they're not going to pay money to see that particular show. And so yeah, you'll have plenty of old bitter dudes to entertain all of your 45-year-old, married alcoholics from the Midwest. There's always going to be enough of those.
I I feel like comedy, I mean, it's important in every type of art, podcasting, whatever, live performance especially. It's important to know your demographic, but I feel like it's more important in comedy.
Yeah.
You know what type of crowd you're going to do well in front of. Maybe the more diverse crowd, maybe a little more progressive, maybe a little more that way. You probably wouldn't do well in like, a small town Alabama. You probably
Actually, I'm booked there next month. For some reason, I don't know why, but I seem to appeal to both of that. And I think it's because of where I came from. It's almost like these college kids, they can smell on you, like these Alabama shows, they could smell these college kids and know, like, you haven't had a life experience yet. Why are you preaching to me? But for some reason, I don't know why, but I can do just as well in front of a show of police officers in Grand Island, let's say. That's a direct example of people that I've done extremely well in front of, versus, college kids in whatever hip city you want to go to. So I think that part of earning your stripes as a comedian is learning how to, first, you have to learn how to do well in front of both of those types of audiences. And then you have to figure out what it is about yourself that you can put in front of everyone, and somehow that translates into funny, whether you're a cop in Grand Island, Nebraska, or a college kid in Atlanta, or wherever you might be.
I've heard Atlanta's a really hard crowd, and I don't know why. It seems
Yeah,
like
it can.
it seems like they're hard for everything though, because, and this is a weird correlation, but I feel like the crowd metric is the same. Like they'll do big wrestling events there, and it is so hard to get that crowd going. And
Yeah, it's a weird.
I'll watch comedy stuff from there, and the crowd is always, they're very quiet, and it's like this doesn't work, but it's just a different crowd. I don't know how to explain Atlanta. It's weird.
Yeah, very very strange. I find it interesting, honestly, when I go to all these different cities. I find it interesting which stuff works and which stuff doesn't work. Is the thing about the stuff that I do is that if one particular line isn't going to get you, eventually around the corner, I'll find some way to get you on board with what I'm doing. But it seems like the one crowd that I am not doing well in front of anymore is in front of other comedians. For whatever reason, I think that a part of me has lost interest in playing to the back of the room, because that's a dead end street as well. And I want to resonate with people. Like, I don't care how versed they are in comedy. I don't care if they've read all of the autobiographies of every comic and have a context for everything that I'm doing on stage and all that fun stuff. I just want to make people laugh. So
Is there a crowd or a venue maybe that you've worked, or a city that you've walked out of that building and said, fuck, I'm never doing that again here?
no, because I think there's an underlying masochism about me that, as soon as I walk out of that situation, my first instinct is to, try and put myself back there, because it's like, okay, what do I need to learn from this ass beating that I just took so that I can do well the next time I go into that situation? Yeah, I've been on urban shows at 24th and Ames in Omaha at 1:30 in the morning, and just, ate shit in front of people. And my first instinct was to figure out how to make it work in front of them. And I went back as soon as I had an opportunity to. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm probably a bad person for that question. Sometimes it's like I seek those experiences, just what I call the comedy Kobayashi Maru tests, so that I can put myself in unwinnable scenarios and figure out what I'm made of.
I mean, I feel like that's healthy though.
Yeah.
I feel like you, in order to do anything in live performance or just in this form that we do things in now, which is kind of the social media stuff and the live performance stuff to a lesser degree, has this. Sometimes you just got to realize you're going to eat shit.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll do a show and think it's going to do really well, and then we'll put it up and it will just absolutely just eat shit. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, how did that show eat shit? That show's really good. And then I remember, wait, there's an algorithm and 1,700 other things, and it's completely out of my control.
Absolutely. And if you can find what you need to learn from those ass beatings, then then you've got something. But I think people that never experienced that, I think they're doing themselves a great disservice because you don't learn unless you're,
Getting
I
your
don't know,
ass kicked.
unless yeah, maybe that's just the way I operate, but um, it's an important part of my process.
I feel like if you just started on like a big level, that would inflate somebody's ego to the
Hmm.
point where they're just like intolerable to be around. Maybe I'm crazy, but
No, I've seen it.
because if you do 1 or 2 years in the comedy scene, for example, which is a very short amount of time for any comedian, 1 or 2, I think you would admit to this, 1 or 2 years, you're probably still a rookie.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
You're
I,
barely,
I'm still a rookie at 7. Like I consider anyone under 15 to be brand new.
and there's these people that get discovered like 1 or 2 years in to be on like a big show. And, whether they do well or not, they get this big head about them. And it's just like, okay, you people.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like for me, this ego, well, first of all, going into comedy, I had no self-confidence at all, let alone an ego when I first started. I was an overweight introvert. Spent many of my formative years playing EverQuest or like just completely isolating myself from other people. So then I enter this comedy realm, and then all of a sudden you start to find some success with that, and then people are paying attention to you. And I think I had those ego pitfalls early on, and now if you stay with it long enough, that like those ego, that stuff will be just driven completely out of you if you stay with it long enough, because there's hard years where you're just out here working for the sake of getting better and no one notices and no one cares. And you know that's kind of actually that's kind of where I feel right now, is I'm just out here working in silence while I'm waiting for the next like big opportunity to come around. But
And
at
it
least I've been through. Yeah.
and it will. I mean, you just moved shop and basically, like you said, started over.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a and I'm sure you did the same thing. When I started podcasting, I made a lot of mistakes early. I did a
Hmm.
lot of shit that I look back on and I'm like, I had the ego pitfalls like you did. Like, oh,
Hmm.
why the fuck did I do that?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you look back on your first couple of years and you just think, oh,
Yeah, but you have to cringe, because if you're not cringing, then you're not growing. If you're not looking back at what you did 2 years ago and feel a little bit cringy about it, I mean, you can still be proud of what you did, but there's got to be that little bit of cringe, because that's the stuff that's like, oh, I want to avoid that feeling forever. So we're going to evolve past that.
I mean, to give you an example, and I think we all have this, there's one show from early on that I can still listen to and not want to rip my ears out, but that's a singular example.
You know?
That's not all of them. There's one specific one, and it's only because the person I was interviewing did most of the talking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes any sense, but like there's one show. I feel like there's always going to be that one moment early on that you can actually be proud of, and then the rest of it you're just like, we're not going to acknowledge that. We're going to forget that
Yeah.
happened. Like I
Yeah.
remember there was that one show that I'm still proud of, and then the next week I was right back to doing just incredibly stupid shit.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, what the fuck was I doing?
Yeah. You were learning, but you didn't realize it yet, because it has to, like I said, it has to feel so repulsive to you to be able to make those mistakes again, that those mistakes have been driven out of you forever. So that's the only way I learn. I have to like fall down every hill, and like I have to make every bad choice along the way, so that by the time it's over, all I've got left are the good choices, I guess.
And a whole lot of bruises from the bad ones.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like, especially now in the social media age, going back to ego, I feel like you can't have an ego anymore. I feel like you're going to get killed if you do in
Mhm.
any of these creative spheres. Would you consider comedy in a creative arts sphere? I definitely would.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like it's the only one that operates the way that it does, to where it's like painting in front of a live audience and have them give you validation whether or not that painting is legit or not. It's the only one you're doing in front of people in real time.
I am so interested and fascinated by comedians because your brains are just wired differently than mine. I will be completely, I could not do what you do. So I have a respect for
Mm.
you for that. Because if I was you, I could not do what you do because I'm a lot like you were with the introvert. I'm a
Mhm.
nerd. I spend a
Yeah.
lot of my time just being like, okay, we're going to make our goofy internet content and then we're going
Yeah.
to go back to playing whatever video game is current.
Yep.
Does this sound familiar?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I maybe by the time you're 35, you'll have some midlife crisis and then you'll find yourself on stages. I don't know.
How hard would you laugh if me and you were still friend if we're still both with Loch 22 in like 15 years and I'm like, hey, so I started doing stand-up comedy. You'd just be like, well, don't say I didn't tell you so.
It might happen in 3 years.
And your reaction will probably be like, don't say I didn't tell you that would happen. Called it. Go look at there's a clip of it. Go look. I
Yep.
literally said this was going to happen.
What I find fascinating about comedy is how many of us are these like introverted nerds and like with social anxiety issues, and for whatever reason are able to turn it on stage. I don't understand it. My family doesn't understand it. My friends don't understand it. So
Or like the social anxiety, maybe a little bit of the ADHD. Like, I feel like every big comedian now has just come out and said, yeah, I'm ADHD as fuck.
hmm yeah. And it's an attribute in comedy, because if you're taking an idea and it's just cycling in the back of your operating system in your head over and over again, you're gonna find the funny in it. And I a lot of times I've been thinking about what I'm going to say on stage almost obsessively for the entire week before I even hit the stage.
That's what I do with my intros to the shows.
Yeah.
Like that intro I did introducing you. I've done that in my head 200,000 times.
hmm
And you want to know
Yep.
something funny? I'm probably going to go back and look at it and be like, that wasn't even the best version of what I thought of.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And I'm sure you've had that
Now,
with a joke too. Like
oh, 100%.
that wasn't even the best version of what I had in my head.
Yep. 100%. That's just how it goes. But if you can let yourself off the hook, then the ADHD becomes a superpower. But then if you obsess and beat yourself up over the fact that it didn't go exactly the way you had planned it, then that's doing yourself a disservice. So
Well, we are running out of time. I do want you to tell us where we can find you, promote your upcoming dates in case we have anybody watching that may happen to be in the area. Because
yeah,
Matthew Blevins is funny as hell. So
yeah, come out and see me. Check me out on all the social media platforms, at least which ones are relevant, like last week anyway, because I'm still on Twitter at Blevo Comedy, Blevo Comedy.
don't worry, I'm still on Twitter
Same
too.
same on Instagram, yeah, and Facebook. So come find me, and I'm going to be all over the place this month. I've got dates in let's see, this is supposed to release on the 14th. So on
Correct.
the 14th, if you come out tonight and see me in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, I should be headlining the Holistic Connection. So come out and see a longer set from me. And it's a great, really cool environment. And they're kind of picking up their stride on that show. And then there's going to be a show following, let's see, the following Friday, I'll be in Franklin, Tennessee. And then the 28th, I'll be in Shenandoah, Iowa, and then in the 29th, I'll be in Omaha. So to get specifics about like where I'm going to be and how to get tickets, just check me out on social media. Always shoot me a friend request on Facebook at Matthew Blevins if you want to, and I'd be happy to message with you and let you know when I'm in town.
Well, the next time you're in middle of nowhere, South Dakota, do let me know.
Absolutely. I've been there. I was in Sioux Falls last year. I'm trying to think. Rapid City. I was just in Rapid City earlier this year too. So
Rapid City seems like it's doing really well for comedy right now. Anyway,
yeah, the venue I did, there were 400 people there. It was fantastic.
well, both you and Doc have been there within like the last year, and it.
Doc was on the show, or he was producing the show that I was on. So
Well, Matthew, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. You have been an incredible guest. Thank you so much for being here. Folks, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Go check out Matthew Blevins at Blevo Comedy across all of them social medias. Go watch the Loch 22 comedy special. If you haven't seen it, type in Matthew Blevins comedian Loch 22. You will find it. It'll also be linked all over my Twitter. Everybody have a good week. We'll see you next week right here on SHREWSWORTHY. I can really speak English well, as you can tell. I totally talk for a living. It's okay. Everybody have a good week. Like, comment, and subscribe. You know the deal. I will see you guys in a couple of days on Two Marks and a Spark, and peace out. Bye.